All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you for those of you who are able to join us today, and welcome, Brenda. We're very happy to see you. It's an exciting day. I've been doing capstone classes for close to 20 years, often at the coast and now on campus. And it is far and away my favorite thing. And this is my favorite day. So I'll start by acknowledging our team, Tony Sebastian, who is at home with her newborn son, which we're all very excited about. Melanie Elliott has been a great part of our team as well. And we all work within the Sustainable Triangle Field Site, which as part of it has a capstone class. And what that is a group research class that is client-based to some extent, focused on solving a challenge or providing new information that will improve the way that we work and the way that we sustain the environment at the same time. So this Sustainable Triangle Field Site is, by its name, focused in the triangle, and most recently has been very connected to sustainability at the university through Sustainable Carolina, thinking about the things that we do, trying to improve the operations of the university and make it more sustainable. So today, this year's class has taken on a really interesting challenge. We had long conversations and we were all interested in lots of stuff, and it was a case of loving everything and having to winnow down a little bit, but they learned a lot about sensors and how they can be great and not so great. And they learned a lot about the challenges of weather, not necessarily providing you exactly the conditions you want, but taking what you get. The great fun of riding around in a 15-passenger van, doing field work, and have come up with a really interesting project that generally is focused on the idea of stormwater at the university. So looking a little bit at the cradle, the beginning where things first land on the university when it rains, to the grave where the water comes out of pipes having run off of the land, and thinking about ideas through these measurements that they made that they may be able to apply to other places around campus. With that, I will turn it over to the team.
Yay. Oh, getting it one at a time. Okay. So yes, just to double check, is everyone on? You're good. Perfect. Is everyone on Zoom able to hear well enough? I got a thumbs up. Cool, amazing. Okay, well, yes, again, just to reiterate what Mike said, this is the 2023 Sustainable Triangle Field Site Capstone. And go to the next slide, but we do just want to welcome you all and thank you so much for being here, even though some of you had to join virtually. We are so grateful for you giving us your time, because all of you played some part, no matter how big or small, in making this program happen. And I know all of us team members gained a lot out of this program. So many enriching opportunities academically and also professionally. So we're really grateful that you all supported this program and support our undergraduate research. So yes, again, just thank you for being here and giving us your time and support. So quickly, before we kind of introduce our project and a little bit more about who we are and what we did, we'll just introduce ourselves as individuals. So my name is Hannah Berger. I am a senior here, and I'm an environmental studies major and media and journalism minor.
I'm Brooke Congmany. I'm a junior here at UNC and studying environmental studies. My name is Claudia Sandoval. I'm an environmental studies major. I'm a junior, and I also have a minor in urban planning.
Hello everyone, my name is Brenda Rodriguez, and I am a junior double majoring in environmental studies and studio art, as well as minoring in urban planning.
My name is Sarah Dean, and I am a sophomore here at UNC studying environmental studies and studio art.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna Colby, and I'm a junior studying environmental science.
Hello, my name is Sophia Sloan, and I'm a junior studying environmental science.
Okay, and then really quick, just visually, so see this, would it be beneficial to like dim the lights to see the presentation better?
We can do that.
Oh,
that should be good. I can still see you and I can see the screen, so I think we're good there.
okay, amazing. Yeah, hopefully that just made the projector screen a little bit more visually accessible online. Amazing. Okay, yes, so here is just a brief run through of the table of contents of what we'll be presenting and talking about with you all today. So here's just a little bit about what to expect. And yeah, so first, before we go into our research project, this is just a little bit of Capstone Overview. So Mike had already mentioned most of it, so I will keep this part a little bit more brief, but yeah, Sustainable Triangle Field Site, what is that program? It is a program where undergraduate students can apply into it, and we ended up being a more intimate cohort where we take kind of like a preset curriculum. And so we're in a lot of the same classes together in addition to doing this capstone all together. And so in our capstone course, the way that we landed on our capstone topic was in the beginning of the semester, our mentors, Melanie, Mike, and Tony, were telling us about climate hazards, and we were learning about climate hazards in general. And two that really resonated with us for affecting our community in Chapel Hill was flooding and the urban heat island effect. So that's kind of the issues that we wanted to capitalize on and see how it could be addressed on campus. And we found that we actually already have some green infrastructure on campus that is meant to mitigate those two issues. So that's where we chose our research questions and our research sites to explore how green infrastructure on campus can mitigate these climate hazards that really do affect our community in Chapel Hill right now.
And so, as an overview of the focus in our project, we decided to focus on three main parts. The first part for our research focus was the extensive green roof up at the FedEx building. So we want to analyze luminance and temperature on the FedEx Global Education Center and just get a better aspect of how this local ecosystem is working at the moment. We also wanted to look into the stormwater drainage conveyance system that's located at Battle Grove and just really understand more of how this stormwater control measure helps influence the water quality and the flow across that space. And finally, our third part of the project was focused on a future application for the Porthole Alley project, from which we'll be explaining more about the potential design support materials that we generated based off this proposed architectural project for the town and university.
All right, so first we'll be going over the first part of our research project, which was green roofs, where we decided to look at evaluating illuminance, temperature, and soil moisture on the extensive FedEx Global Education Center green roof. Right, so the FedEx Global Education Center it represents the university's dedication to global education. It provides a space for students, faculty, staff, and alumni, and it has an extensive green roof that we were particularly interested in since 2007, and also the habitat on site, which is really cool. And so the reasons we were interested in this site in particular, and why we ultimately ended up choosing this site, was due to a number of reasons. So accessibility. We were able to get special permission to go up there for a period of the semester, but also know that in terms of who could access our sensors, the sensors would be safe because public access was not allowed. So that was an advantage. And then also the location of it on campus for the purposes of our Porthole Alley project that Brenda will talk about later. We wanted somewhere that was closer to campus that could emulate Chapel Hill and sort of act as like a representation for the Porthole Alley project. And it also has an extensive roof, which we were interested in analyzing the benefits of. Another reason is because the building had both a green roof and a traditional flat roof. So this enabled us for to have convenient and accurate comparison. And it also has a variety of vegetation, such as sedums and a bunch of different plants. And we also identified a microclimate by the vent on the north green roof, which we'll talk about later, which is also very interesting to our study. So for methodology, we ended up using onset hobo pendant temp light loggers as well as soil moisture data loggers. So the light loggers were used to record illumination and temperature. These were taken at the top of every hour for a period of 2 to 3 months. And then for soil moisture, we used that to measure soil moisture of the vegetation. And we ended up moving these throughout our project. And we also used a control station for precipitation and temperature data, which Sarah will talk about later. Okay, so as for where we put these samples, or where we put our sensors, so we chose to lay out 4 light and temp sensors, and also 2 soil moisture probes. And so to ensure their stability of the roof, we attached the light and temp sensors to bricks, and the soil moisture probe also required 6 inches in elevation. This was also attached to the brick. And then the probe was put into either sedum or the moss patch that we studied. And then we focused on 4 sites. So these are the 4 sites. So to the right is the vent sensor. We were interested in the site because it had different vegetative composition. And then we also have the left sensor on the north green roof, which I think was a sedum that we also put the soil moisture probe into. And light and temp was taken here as well. And then west green roof, we had a soil moisture probe that we put there, light and temp. And then we had a light and temp for the non-green roof. All right. And again, with the vent sensor, we identified a microclimate there. And what else was I going to say? And so the reason we set it up like this was to assess differences between the 2 sides of the green roof and differences in vegetation types. We also placed a rain gauge on the west green roof, and the sensor that we placed on the non-green roof was to be our control for illuminance and temperature for comparison to the green roof. And onto my slide. Okay, so just really quickly, some different types of green roofs do exist. So this is just a picture showing you the difference between an intensive versus an extensive. So extensive has a shallower growing medium, usually with shallower roots. And so it also has been found in literature to have a lesser impact on heat reduction, which makes sense considering that you're not going to be having as much benefit if you only have a shallower growing medium versus like an intensive roof can support deeper growing mediums such as trees, shrubs, and live loads like public green space. So obviously the benefits of heat reduction will increase with intensive roofs. And just to touch on just one study about heat reduction that we found to inform us when we were looking at our data for later was that Lewin Miner in 2005 showed that green roofs were effective in reducing heat flow through the roofing system and found that these provided a 70 to 90% heat flow reduction in the summer and a 10 to 30% reduction in the winter. So we just wanted to have sort of, these are the studies and findings that we had in mind when looking at our data, just to put our data into context and make sure like our experimental system made sense. Okay.
Great. Now we would like to transition into talking about our data and some of our findings. Okay, so first we would like to talk about temperature. So as you recall, we had 4 sensors placed in our system, where we had 3 on green roofs and 1 on the traditional roof. So to compare the differences in temperature, we took an average of the 3 green roof temperatures and compared that to the traditional roof. And this figure specifically shows the average degrees Celsius warmer on the traditional roof compared to the average of the green roof temperatures. And what we see is that from around 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., we see roughly 1 to 3 degrees Celsius warmer temperatures on the traditional roof compared to an average of the green roofs, where at night, we see that the green roofs are actually warmer than the traditional roof. But at the warmest part of the day, we do see that the green roofs are about 1 degree Celsius cooler at their surface temperatures than the traditional roof. Now we will talk about some of our temperature data in context of the EcoNet station, where EcoNet stands for the Environment and Climate Observing Network, which is run through the North Carolina State Climatologist Office. The site that we used as a reference to our data was the Old Horace Williams Airport Station, and we chose this site because it's approximately 3 miles from the FedEx Center. However, it does have some important differences that we'd like to know. One of those differences being that the Econet station is in an open field. It's in more of a forested setting as opposed to where we were collecting data, which is in an urban setting. It's also important to note that the temperature sensor at the Econet station is 2 meters above ground, where our sensors were collecting ground surface temperature data. So when we picked a random day from our data set to compare to the Econet data, we saw that at the warmest part of the day, our temperature readings were about 15 degrees Celsius warmer than the Econet data, which is a very significant difference. And we hypothesized that the difference was caused by where our sensors were reading. So our sensors were reading ground surface temperatures, where the Econet station was reading ambient air temperature. So what we did with that is we moved one of our sensors to a 1.8 meter tripod, and we left that on the green roof, and that's depicted by blue line. In addition to moving a sensor to a tripod, we also took one of our sensors and put it on the ground at E-House Residence Hall to see if the discrepancy in temperature had to do with the fact that our readings were 4 stories above ground as opposed to the ground. So what we found is pretty similar temperatures on the ground at E-House versus on the green roof. We do see a significant difference between around 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. The reason for that difference is because of an identified shadow that's cast by the 5th story of the FedEx building onto the green roof. However, we see really similar readings throughout the remainder of the day between the ground temperature. And then once the sensor was put on the 1.8 meter tripod, at the warmest part of the day, we saw about a 10 degrees Celsius reduction in temperature, which we identify as due to its difference in elevation on the site. However, we do still see that it's about 10 degrees Celsius warmer on the green roof compared to Econet, which is likely due to the fact that we're in an urban setting and is likely due to the urban heat island effect.
And so this imagery, in conjunction with the Caroline and Joan lab and Peggy and her intern, we are so appreciative of you guys. We were just able to assess like what the thermal patterns we were seeing, and this spans from April 5th to April 19th. And so what you see is on April 5th, it's substantially cooler than the rest of the range, and there's also a lot less tree cover, which is really interesting. Which is really interesting because like April is the time in spring where like vegetation is greening and leaf canopy is increasing. So that is like a very prominent spatial difference you can see throughout these images. We also see that the backside of the flat roof gains heat while the north side of the vegetated side decreases in heat, but also increases again. And so we attribute this to the vegetation cover. This is because the vegetation is growing. And that's why we see this sort of decrease in the vegetated area. Since vegetation picks up EMR. And then also, we also see that the surrounding ground heat increases following the first drone flight throughout the rest of the span. So this is evidence of urban heat island, and we believe this is why our tripod temperature is still substantially higher than Econet. So yeah, thank you, Caroline and John Lab, for the imagery.
Great, now we would like to shift gears and talk about the illuminance data that we collected. From this figure, what we see is that the traditional roof receives more light before 12 o'clock than the green roof, where the green roof receives more light in the afternoon. And ultimately, that's affecting how the vegetation is growing and the growing mediums. So speaking of vegetation, we'd like to talk a little bit about the vegetative composition of the green roof at each of the sampling sites that we had. So on the west green roof, our sensors were on sedum sexangular, which looks like this. On the north green roof, on the non-vent sensor, our sensors were placed on sedum kamchatkam, which looks about like that. And then at the vent sensor, which we identified as a microclimate, the vegetative composition was worlds different than the remainder of the roof. And at the vent sensor, we saw spoonleaf moss, red shank moss, and sedum sexangular. Now, we collected soil moisture data from February 23rd to March 14th on the green roof, where we kept one of our soil moisture sensors on the vent sensor for the entire duration of this collection. And for the first 2 weeks, we had a soil moisture probe on Sedum sexangular, which was on the west roof, and then we moved it to Sedum kamchatkam. So here, this orange represents Sedum sexangular, where the yellow represents the water content on Sedum kamchatkam. So from this figure, what we see is that the vent sensor throughout the entire duration of our data collection does a really great job at retaining and releasing water. So the vegetation at the vent sensor does a great job at reducing the urban runoff from the site because it can hold that water and then release it throughout the remainder of its time in the soil, where on Sedum sexangular, the vegetation was not retaining and releasing water at the same rate. It is important to note that after we switched, right here where we switched the location of the sensor, that the vegetation started to bloom. So what we can infer from this is that while the vegetation is not blooming in the fall and winter, the green roof doesn't provide much, or doesn't provide a significant of urban runoff benefits. It doesn't hold and retain that water in the same manner as it does in the spring and summer. Where in the spring and summer, we see the vegetation responding to rain events similarly as the vegetation of the vent sensor.
Alrighty, to wrap up basically our portion on our green roof study, we're just going to go over a couple of key points here. So for the temperature, we're basically seeing that the traditional roof is about 1 to 3 degrees Celsius warmer than the average green roof. And that's essentially happening all throughout the day from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. The average green roof temperature also tends to be warmer than the traditional roof at night, as it's very heat retaining. The ground temperature 5 stories above the ground and at E-house were very similar. The ambient air on the green roof is also about 10 degrees cooler than the ground temperature and about 10 degrees warmer than the Econet station.
And just to further emphasize again what Sarah and I were talking about with this last point on temperature, this sort of complicates our hypothesis that we originally had. And so we were predicting that the green roof would be substantially cooler than both the ground and Econet station, and so this is not reflected in our findings. And so as Sarah said, this is due to elevation. It's also due to long wave radiation. And again, we identified heat island effect. And so it's not cooling as much as we thought. But in context of previous literature, this might be the case because the roof is well insulated and the vegetation only receives water when it rains versus watering from time to time.
All right, and then going back to illuminance, as we see before noon, the traditional roof receives more light than the green roofs, but in the afternoon, the green roof is actually receiving more light than the traditional roof. For soil moisture, to reiterate the points again, vegetation at the vent sensor stores and retains water at a greater capacity than non-blooming vegetation in the green roof. So blooming vegetation essentially is just having greater water retention and capacity than non-bearing vegetation. All right, and now we'll be passing it off to our bioswale team.
Yes. So our next part of the presentation is on regenerative stormwater conveyance. And so the second piece of green infrastructure that we researched on campus was the site Battle Grove. And for those that don't know, Battle Grove is a regenerative stormwater conveyance system. So I'll tell you all a little bit about what that means, what RSC, which is the abbreviation for this long terminology, we'll just say RSC, what that means. But really, this is a stormwater control measure where we're going to be analyzing how water affected, or how this system affected water quality and quantity. Yeah, so before we can get into Battle Grove, we'll tell you about what a regenerative or an RSC is. So an RSC is kind of a structure that looks a little bit like this. This is a rendering from UNC's website, specifically for Battle Grove, but regenerative stormwater conveyance is a series of pools where the water will kind of enter in and flow in almost as if like a bioswale would, or kind of similar to a retention pond, but it comes through, but then it moves through the conveyance through the 5 ponds. And there's usually some sort of sediment in between those pools, whether it be cobble, kind of rocks, pebbles, or sand and wood chips. So just some type of substance where when the water moves through, it can be filtered out, like large sediments can be filtered out, nutrients. But essentially the function of this regenerative stormwater conveyance is to slow down the water, so that reduces erosion and flooding, and it also gives time for the water to move through the conveyance system, kind of allowing biology to do its thing on the water and treat it. And so the water moves through this before going into an adjacent stream. So the overall objective is to not only reduce erosion and flooding, but also improve the water quality and overall stream health in the adjacent stream that it looks into. And so we have just a couple pieces of previous literature on how RSCs are proven to be beneficial. We see that in one study, it was shown to reduce surface flow by 84%, reduce volume and peak flow by 78 and 76% respectively, and reduce suspended solids by 70%, phosphorus, which is a nutrient that we did study, by 20%, and nitrogen by 26%. Yeah, sorry. I got it.
Okay. Thanks for that great introduction, Hannah. And now we're going to be getting into the methodology about how we were able to study the Battle Grove Regenerative Stormwater Conveyance. So we are fortunate enough to have one of these systems on our campus here at UNC. And it's a really unique site. It was built in 2016. And before the site was built, this was just a plot of land that was open, and it had a pipe traveling underneath, which would convey the water from campus to Battle Park. And as you can see here, it's located on North Campus, right at the edge before you get into Battle Park. Yeah, and the landscape architectures for UNC were able to receive this grant because of the RSC technology. So we especially were interested in studying this due to this grant to see if this really is an effective use of money to go towards stormwater conveyance and helping our community with water quality issues. Yeah, and another fact about it is that it treats 40 acres of runoff. So the runoff from like all of this area in the Battle Grove watershed eventually runs through the regenerative stormwater conveyance. As you can see here, this is what Battle Grove looks like, and the stream Hannah was referring to over here, it's more of a natural stream. But yeah, everything in Battle Grove, there's 5 different pools. Everything is natural, it's all natural filtration. So we'll get into a little bit of how we were able to conduct this research. So we decided on 5 sample locations. The first sample location is right as the water enters out of a pipe into the regenerative stormwater conveyance. Sample 2 is after running through 3 of the different step pools. And sample 3 is after running through the entire RSC, but before re-entry into the pipe that goes under the road. Sample 4 is right after the water runs through the pipe and it enters into the Battle Creek and Battle Park. Sample 5 is after running through the stream for about 50 meters. And this allowed for us to have controls with entry from the pipe and then through the regenerative stormwater conveyance, and then also a control at the pipe and then through the stream. And to take these data points, we used the YSI EXO multi-parameter sonde. This was super helpful since we were just able to put it in the water. As long as the water covered all the sensors, we were able to just read off temperature, pressure, dissolved oxygen, salinity, turbidity, and total suspended solids. We also used a flow meter to quantify the flow rate. This wasn't as helpful as for our base flows. We had 0 flow for both days. So we weren't really able to do as much with water quantity as we were with water quality. We also took water samples at the 5 sites and hand pumped them through filters, and they were tested offsite for chlorophyll nutrients. And just another little piece of our methodology. We took 2 base flow days, one on February 28th and one on April 25th. Sorry. March 23rd. And then we took one post stormwater data set on March 2nd, just to look at the difference between when there's excess runoff after rain events. Yeah. We'll get into our data and findings.
Awesome, thank you, Sophia. All right, so now we're gonna go through just a few of our findings, and we decided to highlight dissolved oxygen, temperature, nitrates. We're gonna go through a brief neighboring creek comparison with y'all, and finally have a brief discussion of our findings. So starting off with dissolved oxygen, in most of the graphs, we've separated them into the first 3 data sets in the RSC, so highlighted in this light green here, between data sets 3 and 4, going through the pipe highlighted in gray, and finally sites 4 and 5 in Battle Creek here in blue. So starting off with our 2 baseload days, so those are the 2 green lines here. We saw that through the RSC systems, both baseload days that we got data for started out at approximately 60% dissolved oxygen. So as it moved through the RSC system, there was a slight decrease, approximately 9% on average for the base flow in dissolved oxygen. And we have more of that in the discussion, but we hypothesize that this has something to do with the microorganisms living in the RSC that might be having something to do with the decrease in dissolved oxygen. As it moves through the pipe though, we can see a drastic increase going up to approximately 90% dissolved oxygen going into Battle Creek, which we attribute to the natural aeration as the water moves through the pipe and is naturally churned and takes up oxygen. Okay, and then in terms of the post-rain event, we see a 16% decrease in dissolved oxygen moving through the system and approximately a similar 90% dissolved oxygen in Battle Creek. And just one thing to note is as the water is moving through in this post-rain event, there is less variation in our findings compared to the base flow, which is going to be similar in temperature as well. Yeah, so with temperature, starting again with base flow, you can see a pretty similar pattern in the 2 green lines for base flow, with about a 1 centigrade difference between the 2. So we found a 10% decrease in average baseload temperature through the RSC system, which we attribute to the vegetation naturally cooling the water moving through the system and the natural cooling that the water experiences as it moves through the 5 pools. For the post-rain event, since there's a greater velocity of water, as it is after a rain event, and there is a lot of runoff moving through the system, we see a less variation in the temperature. And then as it moves into Battle Creek, the temperature remains about the same. Okay, and then as Sophia was saying, we collected water samples at each of our 5 sites and tested that for chlorophyll and various nutrients. But one that really stood out to us was nitrates. So we have nitrate concentrations from our baseload 2 collection date as well as our post-rain event. So starting with our baseload, we saw starting out coming through the pipe into the RSC system, concentrations at approximately 70 micromoles and going down to approximately 35 micromoles. So this was a 47% decrease in baseload average concentrations through the system itself. With post-rain event, we see a drastically higher starting amount concentration of approximately 90 micromoles as it comes out of the pipe into the system, going down to about 35 again, which is a 62% decrease in post-rain event, which compared to kind of the previous literature, we found about a 20 to 30% decrease. So this is really exciting to see such large decreases through the system. And also very encouraging is that we see that this sustains through the pipe and into Battle Creek, where the creek itself naturally filtrates the water as well. So this is all very encouraging. Next, we have our neighboring creek comparison. So on March 21st, we took a really fun class adventure. We all got in the van and drove out to 4 of the neighboring creeks around Chapel Hill. So we have Battle Creek here, which we had already collected data for. We went to Booker, Bolin, Meeting of the Waters, and Morgan Creek. So here we have our differences in chlorophyll on the 5 different creeks that we measured: nitrates, phosphates, and ammonium. And then here you can see Hannah put this lovely little data here where you can see that Battle Creek consistently has lower averages or lower
amounts of all of the things that we studied, so chlorophyll, nitrate, phosphates, and ammonium, than the average of all 5 creeks combined. And especially to note, with nitrates, phosphates, and ammonium, you can clearly see how much lower the Battle Creek concentrations are compared to surrounding creeks. And last but not least, we have our discussion of findings, which we're all going to briefly talk about. So I will quickly mention again, the sustained decrease in nitrate concentrations through the RSC system is very encouraging. And we took this to give some evidence to reduce risk of downstream eutrophication from excess nitrates and phosphates, which is of particular concern in urban areas like Chapel Hill. And we think that RSCs would be very applicable in areas of excess runoff, particularly in other urban and maybe agricultural settings.
Yeah, and a little bit about the temperature and dissolved oxygen. Temperature and dissolved oxygen are essential in regulating the aquatic life within streams. So when we looked at this, we saw the decrease in dissolved oxygen, which we hypothesized is due to the benthic macroinvertebrates within the water, which aren't present within pipes that run under the campus, but they are present in the RSC, as well as temperature decrease, which we hypothesized due to the vegetation and increased shade in the area. It was interesting that there's typically an inverse relationship between these two factors, where if the temperature increases, the dissolved oxygen will decrease, which we didn't see, which doesn't seem to be too much of an issue. It'd be interesting to study more about that later on with a more extended study through different seasons than just the spring. Also, we noticed that the dissolved oxygen, while it did decrease through the system, it then increased through the pipe and increased as it went through the stream, where the temperature decrease was sustained through the stream. Yeah, now we're going to talk a little bit more about our neighboring creeks and a conclusion on that.
Yeah, so to wrap up our final discussion of our findings for the Battle Grove RSC, we did ultimately see that when comparing the nutrient levels from Battle Creek to the neighboring creeks in Chapel Hill that do not have an adjacent regenerative stormwater conveyance treating that water, we did see that Battle Creek has nutrient levels below the average level of all 5 creeks. And so the RSC that is uniquely present at Battle Creek, we do have evidence to suggest that it is in fact accomplishing the objective that RSCs are supposed to help treat and filter out some of those nutrient levels. So when comparing to other creeks in Chapel Hill, we found that. But that was our final piece of discussion of findings for these RSCs. So I know that was a lot of research, a lot of data, and a lot of findings just thrown at you. So we can just kind of breathe for a second. But after going over all of these findings, we do obviously, as you have heard, have pretty substantial evidence to suggest that these 2 pieces of green infrastructure on campus at UNC are doing its job. It is in fact helping. And so we're using some of those findings to extrapolate future green infrastructure suggestions into future projected development projects. So then we'll have Brenda tell you a little bit about the Porthole Alley projected development and how we're using our findings to suggest forms of green infrastructure.
Thank you, Hannah. So as our last part of the research project, we decided to apply all our learned lessons from this initiative to the Porthole Alley project that has been proposed by the town of Chapel Hill, and from which we will be talking more about what we've learned. So this project was proposed in 2020 by the design group called Kieran Timberlake, and this is a redevelopment concept that hopes to transform the Porthole Alley area to a mixed-use community hub consisting of commercial, retail, academia, and community spaces to bring together the university campus and Chapel Hill. This space is destined to be a welcoming town entry that enhances the vitality and the character of the town. And the project scope entails the construction of 2 new buildings that connect the Porthole Alley with the with the coffee shop and the buildings that are currently there, such as the Cosmic Canteen area and the building behind that area as well. So this project is estimated to be a large project of about 150,000 square feet of like more like I guess area, sorry, in terms of like just expanding the larger scope of this. And with this idea currently that's been proposed, there are 3 intensive green roofs that have been added into the project plan, as well as some stormwater management ideas, such as adding permeable pavements and an underground cistern system to help filter that stormwater runoff that happens across the site. So with that, some areas of interest that stood out to us when we were analyzing the space and considering what is important for the project, we found it important to understand that the proposal has a lot of program adjacencies to consider. And so, for example, the Institute for the Environment and the Galapagos Center, as well as the Welcoming Center, is all centered around this space. So understanding that was an important component for us to know kind of what the space should have and should entail, considering the story of the area. And understanding as well, like that currently some of the proposed ideas, as mentioned, are permeable pavers and the intensive greenery system, which at times can be very costly, and therefore, such as we're witnessing right now with the project, it can be kind of stopped and and kind of just put on a pause due to the high cost of maintenance in the long run when implementing this, and of course the upfront costs that are associated with this. And so when analyzing that, we decided to understand more of what we could apply from our learned lessons from our research, and we understood that extensive green roofs help in providing health and environmental services, such as reducing heat intensity within an urban context. It also enhances ecological relations across the space with pollinators and local flora, providing additional benefits, such as carbon sequestration, improving air quality, and energy efficiency for the building in the long run. And of course, noise reduction in a space such as downtown Chapel Hill, where a lot of car movement is happening, can benefit a lot from that reduced noise pollution. Through our research with the regenerative stormwater conveyance system at Battle Grove, we understood the importance of measuring water quality and flow data to ensure the local health of waterways and streams so that they can remain at healthy levels of nutrients and just well-being in general. And we understood the importance of community education and community engagement to help relay further information about water health and movement across our environment. And understanding that the nutrient compliance of our local watershed, which is currently the Lake Jordan, is important, and therefore an academic institution such as UNC helping have maybe some sort of implementing projects on site that helps address this could just really help encourage that thoughtful environmental action across the community campus. So our proposed design idea comes in 2 phases: the extensive green roof and the incorporation of a water quality visual monitoring system. So for the extensive green roof idea, based off of one of the sites that was identified on the Grant Advanced Report proposal plan for this project, we decided to include the extensive green roof on that site. And as we've been learning the process presentation, the green roofs provide a lot of benefits, and when it comes to an extensive green roof, the cost can be significantly much more affordable in comparison to an intensive green roof. An intensive green roof can cost up to about $38,300 per 1,000 square feet, versus an extensive green roof costing between $10,000 to $20,000 per 1,000 square feet when it comes to space. And so, and our proposed idea, the plantings that we saw successful from our research on the FedEx green roof would be applied to this space. And then when it comes to the water quality visual monitoring system, helping to further educate the community upon what's going on with our water health and on-site. With the local bioswales that have been identified on the project plan, we would love to maybe have the addition of a public display or public billboard that helps inform more on how the water quality is doing, and also make sure it's engaging for people of all ages to also immerse themselves in this environment, also learn more from the importance of water. And of course, even including like a signage that contains a QR scan code, so that way one can just easily access and learn more about green infrastructure happening on site and across campus would even be something that would be really nice to include.
Alrighty, so getting into our final conclusion and our reflections. All right, so just to reiterate pretty much basically all that we've been talking about, for our study on the FedEx Green Roof Center, we found evidence showing the efficiency of the green roofs in mitigating our study on the urban heat island effects, showing a 1 to 3 degrees temperature difference when comparing the traditional roof to the average green roof temperature throughout the day. For the RSC system at Battle Grove, we are finding evidence of how this system is helping with both excess runoff and with helping to improve the water quality. And we are basically applying our research to help propose a plan for the future for the Bull Alley projects. All right, and just some lessons that we wanted to basically take away from this entire semester. We want to recognize that this is obviously just the beginning of research on both green roofs and on stormwater mitigation. This research is obviously site specific, but we want to recognize that these methods can be basically replicated in other areas to help further our understanding of green roofs and stormwater management. We hope that our research will essentially serve as a resource for students, professors, community developers, urban planners, anyone who's honestly interested in green infrastructure, green roofs, and in stormwater management as well. And we hope that it will serve as a way to, an encouragement in implementing across various urban spaces. And we will have a research document posted more about all of our findings on the Sustainable Carolina website if you are interested. All right, and also feel free to email us with any comments, questions, and concerns. We have all of our emails here listed, so feel free to take a screenshot or a picture. All right, we want to say thank you again to our mentors, Mike, Melanie, and Tony, who could not be here, and thank you again to everyone who has helped us with this project. Without you guys, it would not be possible for us undergraduates to complete this research, and we are just so grateful. So thank you. All right, we will be taking questions now.
Will you manage that, Melanie,
Yeah.
please?
So you can drop a question into the chat and I can read it out, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask, we should be able to hear you.
I'll get us started just so we have a question going. So getting a little specific to start, thinking about the vent, and I love that you explored that specifically just because it was so visually obvious that that was a distinctive part of the roof. Did it help you develop any ideas for things you could understand about what was happening at the vent and maybe extend to more of the roof? Like, is there a way to create micro conditions like that to have the roof be more effective or different in pockets?
Yeah, our research didn't necessarily expand onto what made the vegetative composition at the vent different. At the vent, though, we do think that it might have to do with an increase in surface temperature because the vent's releasing some steam from the building. So we think it has to do with the fact that it receives more frequent irrigation. And a little bit of an increase in temperature, but definitely something we could identify.
Got it. And maybe something that would be different seasonally.
Yeah.
And maybe that it's helpful in the winter and who knows in the summer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Don't see any other questions yet. Peggy did say, great job, temperature group.
I have a question related to the temperature. So when you realize the difference between the Horace Williams Airport temperature and all of that and what you were finding on the green roof, what was the process of like in deciding what to do next? Like, why did you place the other sensor at Airing House, and how did you decide to use a tripod and all of that?
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about that. So we first put everything on bricks, and this was essentially just to stabilize the sensors so they wouldn't fly off or whatever, anything happened. But Sarah started looking into the data after we collected it and was just like, okay, this is such a large discrepancy. We think that this might be due to the brick and the fact that the brick is retaining heat. So we ended up just taking one sensor off and then gathered data from that. And I think we saw there was a reduction. And then so we did the same for the rest of the temp sensors. And then we decided to do the tripod because I think because of EcoNet, right, to sort of mimic the conditions that EcoNet had, but it was really interesting because the tripod was still even substantially higher than EcoNet. And I think this is why we were like, okay, there's definitely urban heat island occurring here. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think even after we had like put it on the tripod, since we were still seeing that discrepancy, I think that also like basically reiterates that point that there is an impact because we're in an urban space compared to more of like a forested area like it is. So. Okay.
Got anything, Melanie?
I don't know,
No,
I knew most
I
of
just
it.
meant from the.
Oh, sorry.
What's your question?
No, I don't see any questions in the chat. Steve Wall, you're unmuted. Are you asking a question?
Yes, great presentation by all the students, fantastic. I did want to ask, like, if you, for future capstone classes, did y'all have any suggestions or ideas for continued research in these areas that y'all didn't have time to get to, or thought if would be something interesting to take on for further classes?
Yeah, well, we can start. So with the regenerative stormwater conveyance that we studied, one of our kind of difficulties that we didn't really get into in this presentations, but we will really get into in our report, is that we had some difficulties with the water quantity aspects of what we were researching. So with water flow, we had difficulties with base flow, at least as the water moved through like the different pools. We had zero flow moving through. So it was difficult to quantify exactly how the water was flowing through, like how the timing worked with that. And I don't know if y'all want to say anything else about that, but.
I guess with that, like the piece of, not necessarily like a recommendation of research people can do, but like a just strategy recommendation for this course is, I think we did a really good job of starting our research as early as possible, as early as we could. So I guess I would recommend that to classes going forward is to, even if you're not like completely sure of exactly like what you'll find and what you hope to find, but is to start the research as soon as possible. Because I know we probably would have wished that we would be able to go out for more rain events. But by the time we had started our research, there honestly wasn't too many rain events that were significant enough where we were like, we have to go out today. But yeah, so maybe just if you start it early enough, then like the students, if they know how to use the sensors by themselves, and if they want to go out on a rain event day without the mentors, like if it's on a day where we might not have a capstone, but we want to just go out and do that, would be my biggest recommendation, to be able to collect more just events and have more examples to see if it's an outlier or if it was just genuinely like what we're finding.
Yeah, one more thing from our team. Our goal was to really tie it to the community, and we were lucky enough to go out in the streams within the community, but we did notice that nutrient levels were much higher, which leads to really concern for eutrophication. So if future teams could do some sort of site analysis within the community to see if there are places where RSCs could be implemented, like within Greater Chapel Hill, that would be a really cool way to apply this research further.
Yeah, and on our side, in the very beginning, we did also want to do research on like water runoff off of the green roofs and the water quality on that side, but we weren't able to access the water cisterns from the FedEx building. So if another team is able to, do some research on that, that would be amazing in helping supplement kind of both of our areas that we studied. So
It would tie it together for the stormwater control measures.
Yeah,
at least.
absolutely.
That would be really cool.
And I think just for our temperature data, obviously, we were really limited in our temporal range for the study, especially because it was like from January to April, I think. And so this is like a very particular season of the year. I think it'd be great to see like these sort of like heat imagery and same like setup during the summer or like warmer months to just really see like if there is a heat reduction effect and also how much is the like heat on the roof changing due to the vegetation growth.
Because this was very prominent in the drone imagery that Peggy got us. So that'd be interesting.
So Jamie asked or said, interesting research. Can you think of other places on campus where an RSC could be implemented?
I think a great spot would be by the Stone Center, because that also, water comes out of a pipe right by the Stone Center. And it's currently a vegetated area, but I think if it was a regenerative stormwater conveyance system, the benefits of the vegetation could be more profound on that site.
Maybe also. We're gonna say reading more.
Yeah, okay, so then we're all on the same page. Yeah, so then all the RSC team was on the same page of down on the southern part of campus where we sampled from Meeting of the Waters. So it's a little further down past the Smith Center, or D-Dome is what you should like call it, but the Smith Center. And yeah, so we saw that that's kind of like a low point on campus. So all the water's running over parking lots and running through the urban environment on campus. And we saw that those nutrient levels were like significantly higher at Meeting of the Waters, especially for ammonia.
I think it's nitrates and phosphate.
Yes,
All of them.
Yeah, and so that would be a good place to put it since it's a low point where it's getting a lot of that water, and we saw that that was, relatively speaking, the least healthy creek.
All right, those are great questions and great answers. Congratulations again, team. Thank you, everyone who joined us by Zoom, and everybody have a wonderful afternoon. Now, if you Great job.
We did.
No, I was so